for the restoration of a national reserve for entitlements under the basic payment scheme for farmers who, and with particular reference to new entrants to farming, to returning immigrants and to the forgotten farmers is generally what they be termed as, because while there are a small enough number of them throughout the country, it is a very serious issue and it's something that needs to be dealt with. And this year there's no national reserve. Is there a plan for one next year?
Thank you. Minister.
The National Reserve measure of the Basic Payment Scheme provides for an allocation of entitlements to eligible applicants. EU regulations governing the National Reserve provide that the two mandatory categories of young farmer and new entrant to farming must receive priority access to the reserve. A young farmer is defined as a farmer aged no more than 40 years of age in the year when they first submit an application under the Basic Payment Scheme and who commenced their farming activity no more than 5 years prior to submitting that application. A new entrant to farming is defined as a farmer who commenced their agricultural activity during the previous 2 years and did not have any agricultural activity in their own name and at their own risk in the 5 years preceding the start of the agricultural activity. Returning immigrants who meet the eligibility criteria for applicants under the National Reserve will be eligible to submit an application for an allocation of entitlements. The terms and conditions applicable to all categories under the National Reserve require applicants to have a gross off-farm income of €40,000 or less in either of the 2 tax years prior to the year in which their application is made to National Reserve. All National Reserve applicants must also comply with requirements in terms of agricultural education qualifications at FETEC level 6 or equivalent. The regulations governing the operation of the National Reserve also include an optional provision whereby Member States may use the National Reserve to allocate entitlements or give specific top-up on the value of existing entitlements for persons who suffer from a specific disadvantage. Support for such categories can only be considered once the 2 mandatory categories of young farmer and new entrant have been catered for. Decisions regarding the eligibility of farmers under the specific disadvantaged category of the National Reserve requires the approval of the European Union Commission. Following my department's consultation with the Commission, the DIN Minister announced in March 2015 that the group commonly known as Old Young Farmers, to whom the question refers, who established their holding between 1st January 2008 and 31st December 2009 and who, due to the time frame of setting up their holding, did not benefit either from the installation aid or young farmer category of the National Reserve, could be considered as a group suffering from specific disadvantage. Following approval by the European Union Commission, this group was eligible to apply on the National Reserve measure of 2015 Basic Payment Scheme. Some 280 applicants were successful under the Old Young Farmer category of the 2015 National Reserve.
Minister, the balance.
Therefore, the Old Young Farmer group has been catered for under the National Reserve.
Thank you. Deputy Kenny.
Minister, really, you know, the issue here isn't been dealt with. Like, while you're setting out I suppose, the terms and conditions of it, is there a reserve there? That's the question, and there clearly isn't a reserve there, and that's the issue that we need to get to. And what I can't understand is why there's a reluctance to try, and I know there is a certain amount of money will come back that will be unspent in various categories, why there is a reluctance to put that one side, because clearly if we are committed to the agricultural sector in the country, we need to be looking at getting new young farmers in place that will have entitlements, and that at the moment isn't available to them. And Minister, what I'm asking you is, will you please make a commitment to put the money one side, to put the amount of entitlements that would be required. It isn't a huge amount for the amount of people around the country that need to get this sorted out, and to put it in place and to do it now, to ensure that farmers, either returning immigrants or people starting out in farming now, can have a future. And that's really what this is about, is ensuring that they have a future.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
I've dealt with the returning immigrants, and I've dealt with the group kind of known as Old Young Farmers. The specific group, I think, where we have a difficulty and we're trying to progress is the forgotten farmer, of which the department estimates there are about 3,800 or 3,900 farmers. The specific issue here, and you hit the nail on the head, there isn't a reserve there presently, because entitlements flow into the reserve in a couple of ways, specifically in terms of clawback on leases, and unused entitlements for 2 years go into the reserve. Presently there is practically nil in the reserve fund. There is an option available. And I'd like maybe the Minister or the Deputy might tell me his views on this. There is another option to put entitlements into the reserve, and that's to top-slice everybody's payment. Now that's something in 2016, perhaps for understandable reasons given the fact that it was a very difficult year, that all farming organisations, with the exception of Macron and Ferma, said not this year. Now, you know, if the Deputy wishes to indicate his support for a top slice, a cutting of everybody's application by 2 or 3%, or the required amount to give applicants under the categories, if the old young or if the forgotten farmers were to be eligible, and there is an issue of getting that category of disadvantaged farmers over the line in respect of EU Commission approval. But if we get them over the line, it's a question of how do we create an entitlement, because I can't just divvy out the little that might be in. I'm obliged under regulations to give them the equivalent of the national average. So that can only realistically be done by top slicing, and maybe the Deputy might indicate his support for top slicing.
1 minute.
You know, fair enough, we understand that, and we understand that there has been a difficult year for farming, but you know, really, I suppose, rather than top slicing everybody, what I would suggest, and what most people out there I think would be acceptable to them, if we looked at the very top end, for instance, I think there's almost 300 farmers in the country that receive over €100,000. If you were to top slice them by even 5 or 6%, it would create a pool of money there. 2 to 3 million, I think, would be created by that. If you take I think there's about 2,000 farmers that receive over €50,000. If you were to top slice them by even 2%, it would create about another 3 million. And that's the small amount of money that's required in regard to this. And I don't think, you know, and that's just something I suppose that we should look at across the House. I don't think that's something that the vast majority of TDs in this House, or indeed the vast majority of people in the farming organisation, could possibly be opposed to. Because what you're talking about doing is taking it from the very top and putting it in to the bottom where it's needed. And that's really what I think we should try and find a consensus on, and do something like that. Because it won't take an awful lot of money, but all it will take is the will and the agreement. And of course there'll be pressure. There'll be pressure from the farm organisations, who will be looking after the guys who are at the very top. But we have to look after the people who are starting off, because they are the future. And that's what this is about, is creating something for the future.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.